Democrats appear to be increasingly alarmed over polling numbers ahead of next year's crucial presidential election. A New York Times Siena College poll finds President Trump is now leading in 5 out of 6 crucial swing states, with 2/3 of respondents overall saying the country is headed in the wrong direction. More voters say they trust Mr. Trump on issues like the economy, immigration, and foreign policy. And now former senior advisor to President Obama, David Axelrod, is asking if President Biden should bow out, tweeting, quote, "Only President Biden can make that decision. If he continues to run, he'll be the nominee. What he needs to decide is whether that is wise, if it's in his best interest or the country's." Let's bring in White House columnist for The Hill, our friend Niall Stanage. Niall, good morning. Does he make a point?
Yes, he does. I mean, I think there are really serious concerns now among Democrats. Those polling numbers that you pointed out are pretty terrible for the president. And it's a very clear reality that they're pointing to. If the election were held today, Donald Trump would almost certainly win. And obviously, from the Democratic perspective, that's just a cataclysm. So there is real fear about this. And when you look into the details of that poll, a lot of it gets back once again to this question of the president's age, with more than 70% of voters believing he's too old to be an effective president.
Well, and I think that every time we bring up the issue of age, it's really mental fitness that is at stake. It's not the chronological number on his driver's license. But Axelrod certainly being called a traitor by some. Former White House Chief of Staff Ron Klain saying in response to that tweet, "The man who called Mr. Biden Mr. Magoo in August 2019 is still at it." So what's their history here?
There is a bit of a backstory here, less so specifically between Klain and Axelrod as between Team Obama and Team Biden. The long and the short of it, Adrienne, is that Team Obama has never really been all that impressed or blown away by Joe Biden's skills as a politician. They like him as a human being. They have respect for some of the terrible suffering he has encountered in his life. But back in 2008, they chose him as vice president more as a reassuring presence than an inspirational one. You fast forward to 2016, then President Obama and the people around him were leaning quite hard on then Vice President Biden not to run and leave the field open for Hillary Clinton. We all know how that worked out. And then even in 2020, in the early days of the Democratic primary, it wasn't as if the Obama people were swinging right behind Joe Biden as a candidate. So that is their perspective on it. On the other hand, the president and the people around him have wounded feelings about all of that, feeling that he has not been accorded the respect that they believe he deserves.
Well, and, you know, it's the history of these swing states that these polls are looking at compared to 2020. But anything goes in a world where we've followed a global pandemic. We have a war going on between Israel and a terrorist organization. We still have people concerned about the immigration crisis in this country. And now it's not politically incorrect to call it that. Is there a shift going on in the Democratic Party, in the makeup of the party itself?
I think there's a shift going on in American politics. And I think that's really a really important question you asked. All of these things have become such massive kind of seismic events that there is some suggestion of the sort of tectonic plates shifting in American politics. We're seeing some realignment, for example, among racial groups and who their preferences lie with. You know, it would take a long time to get into it all in depth, but some of those events that you point to, I think have led a lot of voters to fundamentally reappraise either who they support or what they think of how well they're being served by the system overall. That creates a lot of unpredictability and a lot of volatility in the electorate.
And unpredictability. I don't know that anyone thought we would be here, where people in the Democratic Party are aligning with conservative values vocally for the first time in quite a long time in our history.
Yes, exactly. And unpredictability is a perfect way of describing it. It isn't that people are saying, oh, well, you know, we have the standard differences on tax policy or on the role of government or something. There seems to be something much more fundamental going on that is forcing that kind of realignment. And frankly, I don't know that any of us have worked out exactly how that plays out. I think we're in the middle of the process right now.
Yes, certainly a time of transition. Niall Stanage, great to have a conversation with you as always. Thank you for watching. Go to newsnationnow.com to find News Nation on your television provider. And don't forget to click the red subscribe button below to get more of News Nation's fact-driven, unbiased coverage.